Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending where you are in the world. This is Kohenet Devora Grenn, joined by Kohenet Annie Matan in our fifth episode of Tending Lilith's Fire. Welcome all.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, Annie. It is strange, as we were just saying, to just hear each other, not see each other as we normally do, but we're giving this a try. And then we'll be posting it as a podcast, also on our YouTube channel, but also for myself, probably on SoundCloud. And Annie, you'll be posting it.
I think I'll post it on my Substack.
That's what I think.
So if you follow me on The Priestess is In on Substack, you can catch this episode there as well. If you're hearing it, you found us.
This is true. And so the subject that came up right away for both of us is rest and renewal and restorative time that we are carving out for ourselves in the next week, 2 weeks, month. And we have different reasons for doing so, but we thought it's certainly worth talking about because one of the things that occurred to me last night that it would be good to talk about was opening oneself up to the gift of illness or sheltering in place or even a lack of mobility when you know it's going to be temporary. What doors, what portals do those states of being open for us? In my case, it's definitely better self-care and health provisions for my own life. And Annie, for you?
Yeah, so I'm in Toronto, which is currently in a stay-at-home order. And so, what I think when in California, it's called sheltering in place. And I'm tired and I'm noticing a need to do less, to take breaks. I was just telling Devora that I'm taking a break from a program that I run. We're taking 2 weeks off so that we can all just have some time to restore and regroup, and then we'll relaunch. I'm really looking forward to seeing what can come from that restorative time. Yeah.
Yes, I am too. It's not time we normally give ourselves, at least not without being under duress of some kind. And Annie, you were, I think, asking the question
Yes.
before we came on, what would it be like if we did it without being forced to by
Yeah, not just what would it be like, but I think we're getting to a point where some of us are learning not to get, let me put it in the positive. Some of us are learning to rest before the burnout, to rest before the injury, to choose ourselves before the stop is chosen for us. And sometimes it takes hitting that wall and going, I never want to hit this wall again. And then
Right.
next time we say, I am approaching a wall and I'm going to turn. I'm going to turn and change course before I hit it. And I'm going to choose rest and restoration and revitalization and really choose myself, my health, and my own energy before I have no choice.
Yes.
I'm excited
Yeah.
about that change.
It is a great change. I don't think I'm there yet. I think I've had a couple of health issues in the last few weeks, and I think those have definitely pointed me back in that direction. And I am really recognizing the need to do that far into the future and not have it be triggered, as you say, by a particular incident. It is a gift to ourselves. It's something we owe ourselves. If we're going to be able to enjoy life to the fullest, then we need to make the time to do that. I'm finding myself going on my walks now, really so appreciating every branch, every new blossom, every bird, every animal I see at the animal ranch, every leaf, really everything, every bit of the soil, that I'm just so grateful for to be able to see, and for the sunshine, which we finally are having now in the last week or so. And it isn't just a physical sunshine, right? It's political and moves into all across society. And of course, we have reason for hope because of the verdict this week against Chauvin being found guilty of several counts of murder for killing George Floyd. But what I'm writing about in my newsletter just now is that what is disturbing, deeply disturbing to me, is that we were wondering, we were questioning what the outcome would be, as if there could have been any doubt or should have been any doubt. And so that just reinforces and reaffirms for me the need to continue to do the work we're doing, to fight and get rid of and be aware of, make people really keenly aware of both white supremacy and privilege and institutions that embody and run on patriarchal foundations and the effects, the tentacles that reach out into our communities and our souls out of those positions.
Yeah, yeah, it's such, yes, it's an amplifier of awareness, the trial and then the murders that took place,
Even that day, yes.
even now. And so, yeah, I would encourage, I'm glad to hear you're putting something out. My colleague, Tema Smith, who is the director of professional development at 18 Doors, she wrote an article that's in the foreword that I read, I think today, that was also really great about this. Which I'll try and remember to put in the description so people can go check that out. And I want to say on the topic of rest that all of this, just like the constant distress, right? Like the constant distress that we're experiencing, that we're witnessing, even if we're not experiencing it ourselves, that is taxing our nervous systems. And so we really need that rest just to keep showing up, to keep looking, because we need to look and not turn away, to keep looking at what's happening and to keep engaging. And lots of folks are invoking the Jewish phrase, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. And, then when we get too damn tired, we need to rest and let those who have rested step up. And then the image that I often have is like waves. So, one wave moves forward and the other comes back, gets recharged, and then can step forward again. So in order to be engaged in this process of pursuing justice, of looking at what's happening and not turning away, at raising our voices, putting our bodies on the line, especially those of us who are in, white bodies, that we can use our platforms, our voices, our bodies to show up for our friends of color. And we can also, I know our friends of color are really tired, and we also aren't going to serve anyone in our exhaustion. So we need that rest so we can show up strong and healthy, so we can all be strong and healthy and thriving together.
And I think this is something that every activist faces, an issue everyone faces of how to avoid burnout. And so we are talking about that really in this whole discussion. And thanks for bringing this back to health, because it's so easy to get absorbed in the injustices and the feeling of the pressure of these moments, and especially this year, the imperative to move forward on as many fronts as possible, as quickly as possible, because it all feels so late, and there's so much work to do, and yet to remember what you're just saying, that if we are not whole, if we are not balanced and in alignment, we do no one any service.
Yes. And yeah, and it's interesting, that language, we do no one any service, least of all ourselves. And I think, we often talk about old paradigm thinking, new paradigm thinking here. And old paradigm was sort of everyone is for everyone else. Like there was, especially women, especially people of color, like we live in service to others.
Right.
And so the idea was, you better be well enough to take care of everyone else. Well, now we're learning that we have to be well enough just to be well enough for ourselves.
Right,
To take
exactly.
care of ourselves, not
Yeah.
necessarily for the purpose of serving others,
Yeah.
but also just because each individual human deserves to thrive.
Yeah.
I actually don't believe the purpose of our thriving is to take care of everybody else. I think
Right.
the purpose of our thriving is to thrive.
Yeah.
And that by thriving, we will innately spread that goodness and energy and power and capacity to others,
Yeah.
without having to hustle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also want to note, because you mentioned, the political sigh of relief where you are, and So, I mentioned I'm in Toronto, I'm in Ontario, and we don't have that here. We have a conservative government in our province, and it's been so speaking of, nervous system support, the last couple of weeks have been really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I will say, since we're talking about rest, and we spoke about vulnerability a few weeks ago, and a week ago, I think Devorah and I spoke, and then I got to go and see my partner, and I contacted him. I changed our plan. He was going to come here like late, and I don't even remember what we were going to have, like a late dinner and hang out. And I was like, no, I need to get out of my apartment and come to you. And I just need you to hold me so that I can cry and like just let my nervous system regulate.
Mhm.
And we did that. We just cuddled and I got to cry. And I'm so grateful. I want to note all of the pieces that went into that experience of just noticing what I needed and asking for it, and then showing up where I
Yes.
needed to be to get that care. And I'm
Mhm.
so grateful to have someone in my life who's able to provide that space of safety and comfort and rest. And we like shared a meal and watched TV and snuggled, and that was just perfect for both of us in light of the increased restrictions that we are living in. That particular day, our premier announced that he was extending police powers so that they could stop people on the street and ask for their ID to see if they were not at home, and question why they were not at home, and fine people
Mhm.
for violating the stay-at-home order, which we knew was scary enough for us, and we're pretty privileged, but especially for people of color in this city, we were pretty worried. And they also were closing playgrounds and all outdoor recreational spaces, and schools. So it was like, what the heck are we going to do? And then
Mhm.
thankfully within 24 hours, there was enough of an uprising from the public that the government walked back well, in fact, the police, thank goddess, I feel like we don't hear this very often, but the police said, no, thank you. We will decline that particular extension of our powers. We will not be stopping people on the streets and fining them.
That's great.
So I was grateful to hear that. And the playgrounds did open. So we are able to take our children outside, even if they can't go to school. It's been, to say that it has felt intense here, is an understatement. And so I think that that's been particularly taxing, for a lot of us and our energy. And I do think that's had a big impact on me. And I'm like, why am I so tired? It's like, because going
Yeah,
outside is an act of resistance right now. And that is not a healthy way to live.
for sure. And I think we have, although we don't have that strict rulings as you have been fighting and dealing with, there is still that constant underlying tension of neighborhood listservs having,
Yes.
some active disagreements, and certainly going downtown, which we did, I don't know, maybe last week, driving through only to get somewhere, and noticing, because there are many tourists who come to where I am in the Northern California Bay Area, and noticing how few people were wearing masks, and that people were gathering in restaurants, even indoors, and where we're pretty sure there isn't an enforced, the social distancing, or if there is, it's still pretty fraught when we look at tables filled with people who, of course, have to have masks off while they're eating, but altogether, that's a lot of no masking, and we still know that there are a number of people resisting or completely putting down the idea of getting a vaccine. So that's the tension that we're experiencing. It's not as intense as what you're describing, which was sounding like a police state.
Yes.
But
Yeah. And I think what you're describing too is people don't really know yet. There's this sense of like, I don't know who's vaccinated. There's a question. And I'm one of the people I'm not eager. I'm not
right,
eager to get the vaccine. So I feel the tension from the other side. I feel pressure. I get emails every day from my local politicians and even my child's preschool, get vaccinated as soon as possible. And And I'm just like, I just want to wait and see. That's sort of how I feel about it. And I'm strongly encouraging and advocating for people who want it to get it,
Right.
helping them find locations. I'm really an informed consent, pro-choice kind of person about all of this. But even just the fact that there's so much conflict and people and distrust and questioning of what are people's motives, and who's making me do what or not do what.
Yeah.
It just keeps us pretty riled up, right? Like,
Yep.
is that safe? Is what they're doing safe? Is what I'm doing safe? Safe
Mm.
from whom? Safe from what?
Right.
This constant question of, safe from the virus, safe from the government, safe from my neighbors. Here in
Yeah.
Ontario, there's a snitch line, a reward-based snitch
Wow.
line.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's triggering a whole bunch of ancestral stuff for me, I gotta say. Neighbors, snitching on neighbors, and police stopping people and asking for their papers.
Yeah.
And that feels, there's a lot of fear on all, from every, it feels like there's the potential to drown in fear from every angle.
Definitely that. Yeah. Yeah. And we have,
And, that's exhausting.
it's exhausting. And I was just having that conversation this morning with a client to talk about how do we, what are the mechanisms we have to tone that fear down, and what can we actually do about that. Certainly, I think I don't have many answers, but one of them for me is not monitoring how much I watch the news and how much
Yes.
news I take in the course of a day. So for now, I mean, these days that can include my partner watching hours of Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and all the news rabbit holes that takes you to. But for me, it's also in my email because of some of the subscriptions I have. And so some days just needing to not read it, or just to delete some of the unwanted emails that tell me the political situation anyhow. And so we were talking a little bit about how do we carve out, and I said to you something about revisioning, and carving out time and space for ourselves. And one of the ways that I guess I'm trying to do that over the past, well, several years, is to turn off my phone on Friday nights. And so for some people, it might be around a Sabbath or Shabbat. For some people, it might be just self-imposed on Friday after 12, or on Sunday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., or whenever someone decides to take this challenge, to turn off the phone. I find it extremely difficult and also very rewarding once I'm able to do it. It doesn't mean that I don't read email on Saturdays, but I try not to read business related email. And because my work is in the spiritual realm, that's often a hard line to assess. But I do that really now according to intuition, and what feels good. Is this something I'm eager to know more about, or to participate in, or a program or project I've created? Or is this somebody, demanding something of me, or asking me to do something that is not in alignment with my main work? And so just that simple and not so simple idea to turn off our electronics, for 10 or 12 hours, it shouldn't be that tough. We weren't here 30 years ago.
Yeah.
This wasn't a question, but you were curious about what I was going to say about carving out time and space, and that is one of the ways that I do it, and that I highly recommend. If for
Yeah.
no other reason than for people to see how difficult it is to
Yeah,
understand.
it's funny because when you said the word challenge, like for those who choose to take up this challenge, and I wanted to say, wait, not challenge, like let's treat it as a permission slip or an invitation rather than a challenge. But then you acknowledge how hard it can be. So yeah, I guess,
I challenge myself. So yeah,
yeah. No, and I feel like you were inviting people to challenge themselves. And I guess for me, I'm like, challenge sounds hard. I don't want to challenge. I want permission to turn things off. But then I recognize that maybe, yeah, for some of us, we need it. We need the embodied experience of it being a challenge so that we can push
yeah,
ourselves to do there.
I'm not challenging you all to a duel.
Right,
I
right.
also want to mention an amazing, not surprising, but really well done video of about 3 minutes I just posted on my Facebook page, and that my partner saw this morning on Facebook. But it's a video by Trey, Trey Songz, Songz, called "How Many Lives," and it foregrounds many of the people of color who have been killed in recent years, and it's very moving and very well done, and I highly recommend it.
Devor, let's get the link to that for the description of our video and wherever we post this podcast,
Got it.
so that folks can connect to it. And I didn't expect that we were basically going to invoke Shabbat as the way to what word did you say? Reorganize time and space.
Or to
Um,
revisit it. I'm just saying what it often is for me, rather than, some people do it on a Wednesday. It
Yeah,
can be,
yeah, but
yeah.
exactly. It doesn't matter when it is, but it brings to mind for me, I used to teach a workshop called The Gifts of Slowing Down.
Mm,
And it was heavily based, actually, heavily is not maybe the right word, inspired. I was really inspired by, first of all, the teachings of Shabbat that I grew up with, and also teachings of Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi in his book, Jewish with Feeling, and then also by Rabbi Sarah Schley in her book, The Secrets of the Seventh Day, I think that's what it's called. And
yes.
just like these beautiful little ideas of how to treat time differently with intention,
Yeah.
and how it can start with, on Sabbath we have these particular rituals and we can look at them through this particular lens. But then in the workshop I was saying, like, what if we take the gifts of these rituals and what they're teaching us and we can use them anytime?
Uh-huh.
So moments of acknowledging sweetness, which comes from the grape juice. This is Sarah Chalet now. And letting go of the yuckies, of the feelings, of the hard things we're carrying with us. Just saying, I'm carrying the grief of what's happening in the world, and I need 24 hours to rest from that grief. So I'm just gonna wash it away as I wash my hands. The connection with each other in abundance that comes from blessing the challah, and acknowledging a transition in time when we light candles. So even just lighting a candle and saying, I am starting my 12 hours of tuning out now, and this 12 hours will feel different from the 12 hours that came before. Just these little rituals that come from Sabbath rituals, so that we can just feel different for some period of time. And the feeling different part comes from Jewish with Feeling, where Reb Zalman says, if you're a potter and you work a day job where you never get to do pottery, then the time you really get to feel like yourself may be on Saturday when you take out your wheel and your tools and you make things. And that's contrary to a traditional halach, that may be contrary to your traditional halachic perspective. I don't mean you, Devorah, I mean the listeners. But the idea that that we choose, in that case, he was talking about the Sabbath as the time when we really get to be ourselves, to choose to be ourselves unencumbered, but we can make that choice at any time.
Yeah.
I had forgotten, it's funny, I've been sort of disconnected from Jewish time for the most part lately, and I think I needed that reminder of, oh yeah, I have these tools and I haven't been using them, and it doesn't have to only be Friday and Saturday. I can say, for example, I used to, Mondays when I was working full time, I had to take a sick leave at one point when I did burn out and get very sick. And when I came back 4 days a week, and I took Mondays as my self-care day. And that was the day I had all of my, I went to my chiropractor and talked to my mentor and did sort of personal introspective work. Sometimes it was work on what is now my full-time job, but was at the time my side business. That was all happening on Mondays. And I have just reinstated that in my calendar. I'm now calling it Monday me time. So it may be that Monday is my Shabbat.
Okay. I like me time. Yeah, absolutely. And feeling that we have the right to take that.
Absolutely. And I speak with many people who say, like, I could never. And the truth is, many of us, thankfully, I feel like this is finally becoming a mainstream conversation, that that are 9 to 5, Monday to Friday workday, which is never really, for most people, is not really only a 40-hour work week. When you factor in travel and extra and overtime and children and all of those things, that was a hard one. First of all, it used to be there were no limits on how long we could be made to work. And then it was limited in our society, at least, to these 40 hours. But it was designed on an industrial complex that we're thankfully, most of us are not subject to. And we have more autonomy and we can use it. Because again, the more those of us who have the power to and the agency to make these healthier choices for ourselves use it, the more energy and power we have to influence the collective and make sure that everyone will have the agency and power to be able to live healthier, more balanced lives.
Yes, and I think, that this is also one of the blessings of the pandemic and of having to stay at home. And that is another one of my clients today talked about the fact that she's been working full time from home. And now that it's been established that she is responsible and responsive, she is asking, as they start talking about coming back into the workplace, to still work from home 2 days, because her commute will take an hour and a half to 2 hours of her time and her health and energy each day. And so I think more people now, paid attention perhaps to how they did or didn't care for themselves, having that extra time to perhaps think and reflect at home, and now can take those changes and those new eyes back to the workplace, hopefully.
Yeah, and there are some workplaces here even who have said, I've heard about some companies who said they're not going back. They're not going back to office overhead. They're going to let people work remotely from now on.
Right, it's profitable for
And
them. Yeah.
I think, we'll see what challenges come from that. And I also have to acknowledge I'm one of those people too. I was already working from home full time, and now it's kind of nice that sort of the collective is catching up. There's technology that's more supportive of that now. But I want to mention, at least here in Toronto, we know that those who are most affected by COVID right now are those who are in workplaces where they do not have paid sick time, and they don't have proper distancing. There's not space for distancing. They don't have personal protective equipment, and they have to go to work in these environments, in warehouses, in factories, in processing plants. And so I'm super aware that there's been a real divide between those who could, had the kinds of jobs where they could go and work from home and sit and be on a computer and have space. I feel like there's kind of a spectrum. There are those of us who are able to do that, and some of us who are able to do that, and at one end of the spectrum, there's those who had to do that and are completely alone and in
Yeah.
complete isolation in their homes. And then there are folks who are doing that and trying to take care of children who are maybe also trying to be in school, online at home.
Right.
And the difficulties of balancing what used to take several spaces in our lives is now all happening in one space. And then we have the folks who couldn't leave their workplaces without losing their jobs, and can't support their families without staying in it and being at risk
Yes.
all the time. So I'm just aware, and my hope is, again, like, the more resourced we all get, the more we can share those resources around. So there's a lot of political pressure right now, lobbying pressure to get the Ontario government to provide paid sick days for workers here, so that people will not go to work if they're sick, and therefore it'll hopefully prevent the spread. And they're also trying to mobilize vaccination centers, like mobile vaccine units, to get to those workplaces, so that all of the things for those who want it, all of the different ways that they would feel most taken care of and supported would be available to them.
Right.
And so I think, the more how do I say this? Like, those of us who have the privilege to get as resourced as we can, we go back to sort of something we were saying at the beginning, like, then we can use that to put pressure, to put our voices on the line and our bodies on the line, to put pressure where it's needed, to make sure that everyone has the privileges that we have.
Right. Right. And we can do that. I mean, I have hope that we can do that if we do it in numbers, as you're
Yeah.
saying. in community with one voice, a unified voice, and not let the so-called powers that be, which are really artificial powers, but let's say of the politicians, of trying to divide us so that we cannot make the kind of progress at the rate that we could otherwise.
Yeah. And I know for me, like I can't go to a protest if I'm exhausted. I mean, I find protests actually really, really hard on my nervous system anyway. I actually have a hard time being in big crowds. So I have to find other ways that are in alignment with how I best use my energy. And I encourage folks to like figure out, Reb Zalman would use the language of each of us being deployed in our own ways.
Exactly.
And so, figure out what's your deployment, and it doesn't have to be the same as someone else's. We're not all frontline activists. We can support each other one conversation at a time, one hug, one hug at a time for those, it feels safe to hug. For, just figure out moment by moment how you can best show up. And that really needs to start with how to best show up for and with ourselves.
Indeed. Indeed. And to ask ourselves the question, am I showing up for myself? And maybe to look in the mirror when we ask that question.
Oh gosh, that sounds so uncomfortable. Can you do that?
Exactly. Harder to lie that way. Well, it just occurred to me. So I think I'll have to try it.
Yeah, and if for those, I mean, that's true. I don't know. I think some of us maybe also have good friends and people in our lives who we can even get on Zoom with, and have someone be our mirror and say, can you help me see how I am or am not showing up for myself? I think we're still learning the tools. We're still learning how to be accountable to ourselves in this way, especially with gentleness.
Yeah.
And often our friends can do it for us. Our loved ones, our friends, our family can do it for us in ways that we're not able to do it kindly enough yet for ourselves. So if you're like me, I'll just call myself out on that one and say, I am more likely to turn to friends to have that conversation than to stare myself down in the mirror.
Well, I think, whatever works.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever we will actually do is obviously, that's the thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that you'll actually do. So find the way to do it that feels safe and comfortable and comforting and supportive. Find the way to do that works best for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think just one last thing before we round up, and that is, I sometimes find it useful, not always, because it's very hard for me to actually sit down and do it many days, but for those who journal or keep a diary or are faithful to a paper calendar, especially more than electronic, to set it as a goal for the week or even the day or even the morning. Or then the next day or the end of the week to reflect on how did I do in my self-care? What did I actually do? And there are some fun books out there like Passion Planner. We'll put a link for that. But there's so many options now, for tracking our activities, our thoughts, and what we want to manifest needs to sometimes be written down for it to happen, I find.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think especially how you just said that what we want to manifest needs to be written down. I think words have power, and writing it down. I now, when I've done manifesting rituals, I write out what I want to manifest, and then I tuck it into the pocket of my journal so that I can look at it again and again from time to time. And the things that get in the way. So the opposite practice from manifesting is releasing.
Right.
At least in my experience, what do I want to let go of? What do I want to leave behind? And I used to often have trouble with this. And what I noticed was helpful was when I think about what I want to manifest, notice what the yeah buts are. Like, I really want this, but I can't because, and
Right.
it's the things that come up in the can't because that are those are the things I then focus on releasing.
That's great. That's great. We'll have to put that in the comment in the description of today as well.
Okay.
Manifesting and releasing. I'm going to sign off. Do you have anything? Are you complete, or do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to close by inviting folks to, so in Jewish tradition, we wish people a Shabbat Shalom, or a good Shabbos, but Shalom comes from the root Shalem, which is wholeness. So,
And peace.
and it means peace, yes. So I wish all of us the ability to find our sense of wholeness and peace in the ways that are most aligned for each of us.
Indeed. Wishing you all a good week.
Yes, amen. Thank you.
Take care.